You guys, it is Tuesday. And not only is it Tuesday, it's, drum roll please, International Corgi Day. I didn't even know that as we started the stream. Did you know that today? Do you have any thoughts? Are you excited to celebrate your people? She's like, Mom, put me down. I hate when you pimp me out for content. Can you wave? It is International Corgi Day, which is the best news I could have possibly gotten. Jim and Elite over on Rumble let us know in our chat while we were waiting that today is the best day of the entire year on the calendar. I fact-checked it. It is, in fact, true. So I am like living the actual dream right now. Thank goodness for the best news ever. That's going to be the high point of today's stream, celebrating International Corgi Day, because everything else on the internet is just a dumpster fire, if we're being totally honest, and we are going to unpack all of it right here on the stream. Less than 24 hours ago, Twitter, now X, I'm sorry, I just have to keep dead naming the platform forever because I will never be on board with the X name change, decided to officially sanction pornography under the umbrella of artistic expression on their platform, which I think is a horrifying move if we are serious about moving forward in a moral society. And if any of you have been on Twitter, which is what I call the place where dreams go to die, easier name in just one word there, in the last 24 hours, you'll also know that none other than Dr. Anthony Fauci is in some really hot water from the last couple of days after testifying before Congress about how COVID was handled. We all remember how COVID was handled, right? And it just so turns out that everyone who was called a radical, dangerous conspiracy theorist in the last couple of years, all of those dangerous people who had to be censored on the internet for actually wanting to follow real science, yeah, those people were right. Shocking, I know. And I just have so much frustration and anger that we need to vent about Dr. Anthony Fauci, who does not deserve that title, nor does he deserve the ability to walk freely in society at this point, but we're going to get into it all. But good news is it's International Corgi Day, so thank God for that. As usual, guys, we are live across platforms as we are every day at 3 p.m.-ish Eastern Time. YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, Locals, Instagram, and Getter. And we are growing like crazy this month, which I am so unbelievably grateful for. Thank you guys so much for those of you who are new and tuning into the show every day. It really makes a world of difference for this independent creator over here. If you guys are joining us for the very first time, please do us a huge favor and smash that follow or subscribe button so that we can continue growing these independent channels one person at a time. And as always, you know the drill. Let us know who you are and where you're watching from in our chat so that we can say hello to you to kick things off today. As you guys are doing that, want to give a huge thank you to our amazing headline sponsor of the stream, Public Square, that helps to make everything we do possible. If you guys aren't familiar with Public Square, they are America's fastest and largest growing marketplace of all small businesses that are pro-family, pro-faith, and pro-freedom. We stan Public Square around here, especially during Pride Month when many, many companies are bending over, quite literally, to the demands of the woke mob. Public Square is instead celebrating masculinity and all things true manhood this month. So if you are looking for businesses to support that are rejecting all of the insanity of the woke mob and all of the demands of the loudest people in society, please, please, please go check out all of your new favorite small businesses at publicsquare.com. All right, let's say hi to some people starting on Rumble because you guys let us know about International Corgi Day. My Quilwin, Jim, and Elite and Omnifus Productions are kicking things off for us in the chat. Hello to you all. Over on YouTube, it is Total Package's birthday. Total Package, you watch almost every single day. I'm so grateful for your support and happy, happy birthday to you on this beautiful Tuesday. We've also got Thomas, Amy, Peter, G-Fact, and more over on Locals. RG Robinson, Magic Deft, Nitty Witty. We've got Alex watching and many, many more on Instagram. We've got Sam watching in Hawaii. Box of Faith is new. Nice to meet you. Watching in Pennsylvania. We've got Alberta, Arkansas, Malibu, Salt Lake City, Toronto, Sweden, North Carolina, Kenya, Pakistan, Kentucky, Alabama, New Zealand, my favorite country other than the US of A. I love New Zealand. We've got Tanzania watching, Dallas, Oklahoma, Ireland, Dubai, always wanted to visit, Guatemala City, Canada, Wisconsin, Alaska, my favorite state in America, Colorado, my home state, Germany, DC, Kansas City, Houston, the Philippines, India, and more tuning in today. Chat, what would you rather start with? Pick your dumpster fire of choice. X sanctioning pornography on the platform as artistic expression, bucket of hellscape number 1, or Dr. Anthony Fauci just straight up admitting that he just made up all of the rules for COVID despite being the science. Bucket of hellscape dumpster fire number 2. Which one should we start with? X Fauci? Let me know in the chat really quick because I could go honestly either way. But it's just a freaking disaster over here in America. Everybody's saying Fauci. All right. Well, let's jump right in. So in case you have not been a part of the absolute nightmare hellscape that is Twitter, and I know I keep dead naming, but I just can't get on board with the X name change. And I'll explain why in the second half of the stream when we get to dumpster fire number 2. Everything on Twitter, in my feed at least, the last several days has been focused on Dr. Anthony Fauci. And why is that? It's largely because over the last several days, there have been hearings on Capitol Hill where members of Congress in the United States government are doing these back and forth questioning sessions with Dr. Anthony Fauci, looking back at COVID protocol and policy and whether or not that was actually an effective way to slow the spread, to flatten the curve, if you will. Just 2 weeks, everybody. I'm sorry if I'm like reawakening all of the demons that you thought you had buried down in the deepest, darkest parts of your soul. We are never going to let this go. And here's why. It turns out that all we needed, June of 2024, all we needed was 4 years and some change and a few extra months for the guy who, if you recall, was the science. I am the science. Sith Lord vibes. All we needed was 4 years and some change for Fauci to straight up admit that he just made everything up, that there was no scientific backing behind the 6 feet of social distancing rule, that there was no scientific backing behind wearing a t-shirt or handkerchief over your face instead of an N95 mask. It all just came out of nowhere, or in his words, just appeared. Take a look at this clip that is breaking the internet and tell me you are not infuriated by this 4 years into this conversation.
I don't want to be casting stones at the distortions of what was said in that, but, there are a couple of things that come to mind. One I'm sure is going to come up later is the issue of the 6 foot distance. And I made the statement that it just appeared.
It just appeared. It just appeared. It just, poof, showed up into my memoryscape as this idea that maybe we could embrace. It just appeared. So in this clip, he's actually referencing a prior answer that he gave during this same series of hearings that's been happening over the past several days. It just appeared. The internet immediately went insane, and this conversation started going viral with the mainstream media reporting on it. So now he's looping back around because everyone's distorting what I said. Even though what I said was quite literally, it just appeared. Everyone's taking my words out of context now. So what did he really try to say?
That got taken at like, I don't know what's going on. It just appeared. It actually came from the CDC.
So it's somebody else's fault, not my fault. It just appeared, but I didn't make this manifest or appear. It was the CDC, and I'm not the CDC. I am the NIH. So don't worry. It wasn't me. It was just everyone else that was looking to me as the guy, as the science.
CDC was responsible for those kinds of guidelines for schools, not me. So when I said that it just appeared, it appeared. Was there any science behind it? What I meant by no science behind it...
Because he did say that. He, in fact, did say that. Was there any science behind it? No. There was no study. It just appeared. But don't worry, it wasn't me. It was the CDC.
Is that there wasn't a controlled trial that said compare 6 foot with 3 feet with 10 feet. So there wasn't that scientific evaluation of it. What I believe the CDC used for their reason to say 6 feet is that studies years ago showed that when you're dealing with droplets, which at the time that the CDC made that recommendation, it was felt that the transmission was primarily through droplet, not aerosol, which is incorrect because we know now aerosol does play a role. That's the reason why they did it. It had little to do with me since...
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm mishearing things, but I thought you literally just said like 5 seconds ago, it had nothing to do with me, but now it has little to do with you, which is interesting as you're attempting to clean up from the house on fire that you just created mere hours before this by referencing what you said before. So interestingly, the mainstream media, as he mentioned, totally distorted everything he said and started reporting on this, and the narrative got out of control. So what did the mainstream media actually say? The Toronto Sun reported that Fauci said in this testimony he was, quote, not aware of studies at all, no studies that supported social distancing, and said the first time around that any type of study related to social distancing would have been very, very difficult to do. Basically, we couldn't have done something like that, so it just appeared. There was no scientific background for it. He also told the committee that he didn't remember at the time reading anything to support that masking kids would prevent COVID. He was straight up asked in this committee hearing, do you recall reviewing any studies or data supporting masking for children? My dog hates Dr. Fauci, as she should, because Dr. Fauci abuses dogs, which we'll get to here in just a second. He was straight up asked, do you recall reviewing any studies or data supporting masking for children? To which he responded, I might have, but I don't recall specifically that I did. In other words, I just pulled this crap out of my butt. Wow, literally, that was a nice analogy. Well done, Isabel. I just pulled this crap out of my butt, out of thin air, and we just created whatever rules we wanted to while ridiculing and shaming anyone, particularly any scientist, any doctor, any public health official that didn't go along with what we were saying, as incompetent, as a conspiracy theorist, as a liar who deserved to have their entire livelihood taken away from them. And this is where I, in particular, just get really, really pissed. Because for those of you who don't know, my scientific background and my academic background is entirely in biomedical sciences. And in March of 2020, when the 6 feet social distancing rule and the masks thing suddenly appeared, not because of Dr. Fauci, but because of the CDC, apparently, I was studying international health law from the top people at the WHO. I was studying bioterrorism. I was studying how we deal with pandemic response and what the NIH does and all of these things from the top people at the NIH and at the CDC and at the FDA at Georgetown University. And I vividly recall being told by literally the top paid people at the World Health Organization, at the CDC, at the NIH, at the FDA, that they had never seen anything like this in all of their career of pandemic response, that the 6 feet social distancing thing, that the masking thing, that all of it actually flagrantly went against what we knew to be scientifically true about the spread of disease, and that not only was there no science to support these ideas, but these ideas actually went entirely 180 perpendicular, contradictory to science as we knew it. It would make disease worse. All of these things were being told to me in my classroom, and then those same people would go on TV and then they would support all of these ideas from Dr. Fauci, largely because they would have their entire livelihood taken away, their entire reputation taken away, their entire opportunity to teach the next generation taken away. So I get really angry when I see stuff like this, and I think it's important that we don't forget about it, okay? Because the entire world moved on. We forgot. It's no longer 2 weeks to slow the spread. That was actually 3 years to slow the spread. It's no longer any of that stuff. We let it go. We moved on as a society. But this guy is banking on the fact that you will move on, despite all of the receipts being obvious that he is almost solely responsible for the death of literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people all over the world that were following all of these protocols because I am the science. And that's just my opinion. I'm not going to try to get sued here on the stream today. It is purely my point of view, perspective, opinion that this guy is directly responsible for everything that went wrong during COVID. Take that for what you will. But the rest of the internet seems to want to prove this as well. So we'll hear the last little bit of this misinformation campaign, and then Michael Knowles' account put together some receipts for us.
I didn't make the recommendation, And my saying there was no science behind it means there was no clinical trial that proved that. That's just one of the things that got a little distorted in the response to that.
And I've learned and watched you over the years. I have to go back to the Zika.
The COVID vaccine 100% effective?
I don't believe any vaccine is 100% effective.
Same hearings. As we are talking about this in the last several days, in these same hearings on Capitol Hill, Dr. Anthony Fauci was straight up asked this week, do you believe the COVID vaccine was 100% effective? It's a pretty easy statement to make in 2020. It was an easy statement for this man and everyone else who took advice from him to make on television with the little death count in the corner on cable news. Do we all remember that? In 2020, it was easy for social media sites to use that statement as an opportunity to kick people off of their platform entirely if you argued that the vaccine was not 100% effective. In 2024, you can say, no vaccine ever in the history of science is 100% effective. But could you say that in 2021? Dr. Fauci sure as hell didn't.
Although you don't like to see breakthroughs, the fact is this is one of the encouraging aspects about the efficacy of the vaccine. It'll either protect you completely.
Completely. The vaccine, the COVID vaccine, which skipped a whole lot of safety trials at the FDA, by the way, which is why I decided not to get it as a scientist because it was extremely rushed compared to how we normally approve vaccines in this country, will either completely effectively prevent you from getting COVID, in other words, is 100% effective, or
against infection. If you do get infected, the chances are that you're going to be without symptoms, and the chances are very likely that you'll not be able to transmit it.
Or if you get sick, you will not have any severe complications of the illness. Wrong. And you probably won't be able to spread it to anybody else. Also not how vaccines work, by the way. It doesn't prevent that. But okay. So all it took was what? 4 years and some change? Keep in mind, this is the guy. This isn't just a random scientist from some government agency that's massively overpaid because of the bloat of bureaucracy and who's gotten movie deals and book deals and all of that. This is the guy. In his own words, this is the science. Do we recall this from 2021?
And I'm going to be saving lives, and they're going to be lying.
It seems another layer of danger to play politics around matters of life and death.
Right, exactly.
One would agree. One would agree it's dangerous to play politics around matters of life and death, but not the science.
Exactly. And to me, that's unbelievably bad because all I want to do is save people's lives. And I mean, anybody who's looking at this carefully realizes that there's a distinct anti-science flavor to this. So if they get up and criticize science, nobody's going to know what they're talking about. But if they get up and really aim their bullets at Tony Fauci, well, people could recognize there's a person there, so it's easy to criticize. But they're really criticizing science because I represent science.
I am the science. When they criticize me and say that I'm wrong, they're not really criticizing me as a person because it's easy to criticize me as a person. What they're actually criticizing with things that have, now we know, no scientific support or evidence whatsoever, when they criticize things that have no basis in the history of pandemic response that we can now say, but we couldn't say that in 2020. When they criticize my insane ideas that just appeared spontaneously out of nowhere, they're not criticizing me. They're criticizing the science. Because I represent the science. It's giving I am the Senate. Literally. And I made those memes in 2021 when that interview from Face the Nation came out 3 years ago. And then here we are in 2024 where this guy's ideas caused mass chaos all over the planet. The 6 feet social distancing thing, where you still see stickers on the floor at the grocery store and the DMV. I was just at the DMV the other day, and there are still the 6 feet social distancing stickers, even in Florida. Still there, because this guy had an idea that just appeared and shockingly has zero scientific basis. Clutches pearls, color me surprised. 4 years later, we all were forced to strap things to our faces for years to go shopping, to go to your school, to go to your job, because of an idea as for kids that just appeared spontaneously and had zero scientific backing because of it. Let alone the fact that kids, by the way, are massively, massively struggling with loss of learning deficits and deficits in social behavior and deterioration there, which was a huge issue during 2020, but certainly has only continued to grow as those toddlers and young kids have grown up in a time where they can't even recognize basic human facial cues. I, for example, as currently at that time in 2020, a graduate student in biomedical sciences, policy, and advocacy, again, learning from the top people at the WHO, at the CDC, at the NIH, Fauci's colleagues, posted on Twitter at the time about how a cloth t-shirt mask will do nothing for you. An N95 theoretically might, but you're still being paranoid at that point. But a cloth t-shirt mask or a handkerchief will do nothing for you. And instantly, my account was temporarily banned. I remember posting certain things on YouTube that went against the WHO's official rulings, largely influenced by none other than the science himself, Dr. Fauci, science incarnate, because of this guy, and my YouTube channel instantly temporarily disabled and shut down. I know several physicians and scientists that had their license to practice medicine taken away during the pandemic because they said there was no scientific evidence to support a social distancing rule or a face mask rule, particularly for kids. But the mob, with their pitchforks and fire, had to go on a witch hunt for good scientists that were actually willing to follow the science. Not Dr. Fauci, but an overwhelming support of evidence in peer-reviewed studies from the community of science, which always historically, if you think back to your second grade science class teaching you the scientific method, has always been dedicated always to asking the biggest questions, going and looking for all of the data and evidence and research to support your claims. And then later, I don't know why my camera is being dumb. Wake up. And then later, all right, we're just going to be stupid today. Later, using that evidence to prove or disprove your claim. That's what science is supposed to be. But if you did that as a scientist and a doctor in 2020, you would be silenced, excommunicated, delicensed. Your science had to be Fauci approved. And keep in mind, this guy is not a good guy. Okay, he's never been a good guy. In 2021, it was exposed that Dr. Fauci had been working for years on extremely controversial and wildly unethical animal experiments at the NIH that were federally funded and included dogs being experimented upon under Dr. Fauci's leadership at the NIH that had their vocal cords cut out, that purposefully infested dogs with ticks, that placed dogs in cages with infectious sand flies. Total side note story for you. I take Halloween very, very seriously in my house. I always have from growing up. And we usually do like family themed costumes. But the first year I knew my fiance, the first year we were dating, we'd only been dating for a couple of months. We had nothing to wear for Halloween and we were freaking out because it was actually Halloween and we had no plan. And then we had gotten invited to go to a friend's house for a Halloween party. So we ran to Spirit Halloween and everything had been cleared out, obviously. And then we saw a prop that inspired an idea for our 2021 Halloween costume, which, yes, was in fact evil Dr. Fauci and the sad, tortured beagles in his laboratory at the NIH. I made fake wrinkles all over my fiance's forehead. Good stuff. So clearly I've been quite passionate about this subject for a very long time, because this is not a good guy and the world needs to know just how bad he is. But I guess it doesn't matter when 2024 looks a whole lot more like 1984 than an actually progressive future, right? Truly progressive, moral, enlightened societies don't forget our past. We certainly don't erase history. And more importantly, we don't rewrite history. We would never let something like this go. But in 2024, which looks a whole lot more like George Orwell's 1984, where we do rewrite history thanks to the Ministry of Truth, which is really just the modern press and the lack of journalism in this society, you can rewrite history by going 4 years and some change into the future to then be able to publish headlines like this, published at 6 a.m. this morning in the UK. On the front page of the Telegraph, COVID vaccines may have helped fuel the rise in excess deaths during and after the pandemic. Science experts are calling for more research into the side effects of COVID vaccines and possible links to mortality rates. Researchers from the Netherlands have analyzed data from 47 Western countries and discovered that there have been more than 3 million excess deaths since 2020, with the trend continuing despite the rollout of vaccines and containment measures. They said the unprecedented figures raised serious concerns and called on governments to fully investigate the underlying causes, including possible vaccine harms. Front page of this morning's Telegraph newspaper in the United Kingdom. 3 million people dead, according to experts, largely because of vaccine harms that warrant mass additional research in the scientific community. Research, by the way, you weren't allowed to do in 2020 or in 2021 or in 2022 or in 2023, because if you did, you were criticizing the science. You were buying into the anti-science rhetoric and questioning fact that just appeared. Fact with no evidence or data to back it up. Fact that only existed in the concrete hallways of one imbecile's mind who is a bigger narcissist than anyone I've ever seen on the face of the planet, and they hope that you forget. In February of 2023, so almost 3 years later, it's okay to publish headlines like this in the media. Our Ministry of Truth from 1984 turned 2024. Face masks made little to no difference in preventing the spread of COVID, according to an American study published last February, a little over a year ago. Who made that study? The CDC! The stance of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention has taken many twists and turns throughout the COVID pandemic. After initially claiming that face coverings weren't necessary, which you guys might not even remember, but was the initial stance of the CDC right at the beginning of the pandemic, the CDC changed course almost immediately in April of 2020, calling on all Americans, even children as young as 2 years old, to mask up. That September, then director of the CDC, Dr. Robert Redfield, said that face masks are, quote, the most powerful health tool we have, even suggesting that they might offer more protection than vaccines. Because of those recommendations, largely started by one guy, can you guess what his name is? The science played a large part in more than 30 states. 39 U.S. states eventually enacted mask mandates statewide. Last February, a new scientific review led by 12 researchers from esteemed universities around the world suggests that, shocker, widespread masking may have done little to nothing to curb the transmission of COVID-19. And of course, we now know that 6 feet of social distancing did nothing to slow the spread of COVID-19. The media, the government, which is who Dr. Fauci works for the record, and everyone else in positions of influence is praying that you will forget. That you'll forget, that you'll move on. That you'll say, did it really matter? That was a crazy time. That was a crazy few years, but did it really impact my life that much? To have to inject myself with an experimental substance, to have to wear this thing on my face that probably made me more sick in the long run, which studies now are suggesting that we were talking about as actual scientists in 2020. You're going to get colds, you're going to get pneumonia, you're going to get bacterial infections if you wear the same thing on your face that, let's be honest, none of us washed or threw away the entire time. It's only going to make things worse, but you couldn't say that then. They want you to forget that you weren't allowed to hug your loved ones, that you weren't allowed to visit your loved ones as they died in the hospital. At the time that all of this was happening, someone very close to me in 2020 lost their father on Good Friday, April of 2020, from a very, very rare autoimmune disease that wasn't COVID. I want to say that for the record because they kept trying to put COVID on this person's health record and death certificate, but is a really rare autoimmune disease that usually shows up in middle-aged men in their 50s. He was just about to turn 50, this individual. And it basically shows up as a skin condition and then almost immediately ends up in lung failure. And 99% of the time, the men diagnosed with this very rare autoimmune disease die. And because he had to be hooked up to a ventilator in a hospital in the beginning of April of 2020, he was never allowed to be visited by his wife in the hospital, who said, I won't even leave the hospital. I don't even need to go home. I just need to be with my husband. Wasn't allowed to be visited by his wife, wasn't allowed to be visited by his children. And after being in the hospital for a little over a month, ended up passing away on Good Friday in 2020. They tried to put COVID on his death certificate 8 times, even though they tested him for COVID over and over and over and over again. And on the day that they decided to remove him from life support, from the ventilator, he had 3 children, and his parents and his sister and everybody wanted to be there to say goodbye to their family member. And the hospital in Denver only allowed wife and 1 child to go say goodbye to their father forever. And they couldn't touch him. And they had to wear masks, and they couldn't touch each other. I held my friend's sister as she was sobbing her eyes out, saying goodbye to her father on Skype. On effing Skype. Forever. When she couldn't have the opportunity to embrace her dad one last time because of the rules established that just appeared from this asshole. I will never forget that day, ever. They couldn't have a funeral for their dad because we have to social distance, no gatherings, no touching, 6 feet. Ugh. They couldn't properly mourn the loss of their dad because the kids couldn't even see their dad's body. So how do you even process that he's gone? And they're hoping that you'll forget all of that. And they were lucky, actually. Most people that I know who had somebody die during COVID weren't allowed to visit them at all in the hospital. People died alone, heartbroken and miserable. They weren't allowing priests into hospitals to do last rites, to take confessions from people on their deathbed because of social distancing. How unbelievably ridiculous. And they'll pray that you forget. All of this, especially related to the masking, when Dr. Fauci this week can just straight up admit, yeah, I made that up. I made up the masking of kids. Really makes me think of all of the videos that went hyper viral in 2020, 2021 of families with little kids whose lives were forever changed because of these insane rules. Do you guys remember the family that's from Breckenridge, Colorado? She's an amazing content creator, a fitness creator, and a mom. She's from Breckenridge, Colorado, and she was at the Denver airport with her family and her 2-year-old. Remember, that's where this rule came from. The CDC and Dr. Fauci at the NIH said face masks are the most important health tool we have to fight back against COVID, demanding that all Americans, even children as young as 2, mask up everywhere. Her 2-year-old didn't want to put a mask on a United Airlines flight, and they were banned from United Airlines for life and almost federally detained by law enforcement officers because their 2-year-old didn't want to put something that didn't work on their face. This is Elizabeth, I think you pronounce her last name Fulop, I'm pretty sure, who lives in Colorado. I've been following her for years now. Remember this going absolutely viral?
We just got kicked off the flight because our 2-year-old would not put on a mask, and we tried. I mean, I'm gonna put a video on. And they're sending all of our bags and Adeline's car seat to New York. And we're banned off of United forever because a 2-year-old would not put on a mask.
Let me show you the family property, okay? Okay, Musa Adeline. Musa Adeline.
Look at this beautiful little girl.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, same. None of us wanted to do that. None of us wanted to do that in 2020. Look at this beautiful little girl. Unbelievable.
Pode para você, tá? Boa, family.
Do you want to try putting it on her?
Yeah.
Adeline,
Musa Adeline.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost ready to go. So please put away your carry-on items, including your large electronic devices like laptops. Feel free to keep using it.
I'm gonna have to ask you to grab the belongings and that's good, but we gotta be getting away from this. Why? We're over here holding this mask on her face.
The parents were forced to sit there and hold a mask over their child's face because she refused to put it over her ears and wear it autonomously. This is a 2-year-old toddler. And they still kicked them off the flight.
Sorry, sir. I did make it up for you. I took that opportunity and I ran with it. You see this? I'm literally covering her face. I've gotta keep it on. Do you guys do this all the time or what? Like, what? If there's non-compliance, yeah. This is compliance. I'm literally holding it over my daughter's face. This is compliance right here.
We can't force her. She's literally holding it and she's crying.
You're gonna do this to us? Like right now? Yeah? Wow.
All right, let's go.
Your jacket's okay.
Okay. Go.
You saw at the beginning of that video, the mom explaining that they sent their bags on to their final destination. If I remember correctly, they were supposed to be going to a family gathering, and it was like a family emergency. They really needed to be there, and they weren't able to make it. It was a total disaster. They were banned for life from flying anywhere that United Airlines flew. To this day, I believe they are still banned from the airline because their 2-year-old didn't want to put something on her face that she couldn't breathe for several hours. Even as they were forcibly holding something over her face, they were non-compliant with the airline's policies, and therefore they were the bad guy. They were rejecting the science. They were, at the time, viewed as likely criminals by many of these states and airlines and the travel agencies and everything operated by the government that mandated you put this on your face and you don't ask questions. Even if we find out 4 years later, it just appeared. There was zero evidence to support any of these ideas. It just manifested out of thin air. I'm sorry that this is probably bringing up lots of horrible memories for people. It certainly is bringing up horrible memories for me. But is this not precisely the reason we do not forget? We don't let this go. They want you to move on and to say, was it really that bad? Yes, it was actually that bad. Marcus and Courtney just said in our Instagram chat, I'm literally experiencing PTSD watching this. I had a lady chew me out and call me names once in an airplane because my nose wasn't covered. Yeah. Marty, a pandemic of the unvaccinated. Remember when they called it that? This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. The winter of illness and death. If you are unvaccinated, you will never make it through the winter of illness and death. And it turns out, maybe that was the right call. But you couldn't say that for the last 4 freaking years. And now they just hope that you'll ignore it. Even after 3 million plus people have died, not from COVID, but likely from vaccine harms of the COVID vaccine since 2020. Keep dropping your stories in the chat because I'm sad reading these, but I think it's important we keep talking about it. HWD, I live in Melbourne. Yikes. We had the longest draconian lockdowns. I remember mandatory masks, vaccines, or lose your job, QR check-ins, curfews, travel restrictions, everything. Yep. Epo Rose, the priests at our church would give people last rites during COVID. They said it was part of their vocation. We had families actually join our church because our church was the only one in the area who would do that. I mean, you gaslit people so much that you actually convinced priests whose entire vocation is to minister to people when they need it the most that they can't go give last rites to people on their deathbed. Amy, my great aunt passed away in March of 2020, and the hospital wouldn't let my grandma, her sister, go sit with her during her last days until my aunt called and threatened to sue. Wow. Wow. What else do you guys say? Totes. We lost more than half our business during COVID. Don't forget. DM Lions. The whole plan was to force people to comply. They literally shut down the whole country. It's all about control. Clifford, I still see people wearing masks. Absolutely stupid. And I know they have no underlying health problems. Have you guys been to the airport lately? Masks are making quite the comeback, apparently. Badass Farm Girl. Good handle. I was forbidden from flying because of my respiratory and autoimmune conditions, and I can't wear a mask. I was forced to drive cross country. Seriously? That's so ridiculously pathetic that these airlines did that to you. H. Ladd, I was denied and still was denied to go to college for massage therapy this year because I didn't get the needle, even though the governing body over all of it doesn't require me to get it. Megs Monty, so glad I forever altered my body with a vaccine because my healthcare job required it and I couldn't lose the job at the time. It was only paying me $40,000 a year. How many tens of millions, if not billions, of people all over the world were in exactly the same situation? That you genuinely couldn't afford to lose your job because you couldn't lose the opportunity to provide for your family. So they forced you into taking maybe not 1, not 2, but up to 5 vaccines that now may be contributing to millions of deaths around the world because that was the science, and come hell or high water, we have to follow the science. And here we are several years later. Yeah. How insane. How insane. Lavender Fields, I'm a ballet dancer, and I remember being forced to wear masks by the government during heavy workouts and rehearsals. Do you remember all of those scientific studies in 2020 and 2021 demanding that you wear a mask while working out and insisting that it wasn't bad for you. And then all of these videos started emerging of people passing out and getting really sick because they weren't getting enough oxygen while they were working out. I do. I remember. Unfreaking believable. Faith Lynn, on that note, I lost my group fitness building, my business, because we kept getting shut down. Melanie, I delivered our baby at the hospital in December of 2020. No one, not one person, could visit except my husband, and both of us had to be COVID tested before admission to the hospital. Good God. Paris, I sent my kids 4 hours away to go to school so that they could experience less restrictions because LA County, worst of the worst, was and is still psychotic. It was my only option for them. ACTA, my daughter's soccer team had to play all of their games in high school, the entire game, with their masks on. How many stories still exist like this? Total package. What about all of the athletes who have dropped dead suddenly on the field or on the court because of heart conditions? Are we allowed to ask about that now? Now that the Ministry of Truth is reporting on these things? Now that we went back and rewrote our history? Great question. Damascus Taco. I lost the most influential man in my life in 2020, and I was not allowed to go visit him in the hospital. And there was a limit of 10 people allowed to go to his funeral. My Time Magic Mike. I used to work in the funeral home business for 10 years, and during the COVID period, I had families that had been told that their loved ones passed away from COVID, but their COVID test came back negative. Exactly what happened to my friend who lost his dad in the midst of the COVID pandemic. Because if you recall, hospitals were getting kickbacks from who? The NIH. From who? The science. If they had enough COVID diagnoses, they got special grants from the government. Paris, college swimmers had to wear masks in the pool. Yes, this is true. How many millions upon millions upon millions of stories exist just like this? Which now we can just forget about. We can just move on from. Please, they beg of you. Because if we go back and we unearth how many times people lost their businesses, how many times people lost admission to school, how many times people were delicensed from practicing medicine or their job for refusing to comply with this, how many times people were deplatformed from social media and kicked off the internet, how many times people couldn't say goodbye to their loved ones as they died in a hospital bed alone, where they wouldn't receive last rites from a priest. How many times people experienced vaccine injury only to be told you are never allowed to tell a soul about this, because if you do, you're a radical, evil conspiracy theorist that's only trying to make everybody sick and kill everybody's grandmother. If we revisit any of that, if we call this man what he is, which is a psychotic, narcissistic, manipulative fraud, are we still going to be considered bad guys? Are we still going to be called conspiracy theorists? Are we still going to be deplatformed and fact-checked by the experts? Because I'm sick and tired, I'm exhausted, frankly, of the incessant obsession with people in positions of power calling this guy the expert, the science. If anything, this guy is the propaganda. He is the problem. And he is exactly why I, for one, refuse to forget what has happened in the last several years. So on that note, any predictions, chat? For what's going to happen moving forward? Will there be any justice against this individual? Will we halt distribution of COVID vaccines until we can figure out what's going on? Per the front page of the Telegraph this morning, will people stop wearing masks alone in their car? Will we finally remove the 6 feet of social distancing stickers? I mean, good God. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Probably not, because we're not allowed to revisit that. Only they are allowed to revisit history. Only the Ministry of Truth is allowed to alter facts. Jim put it perfectly. Nothing will happen to Fraudchi. Dr. Fraudchi, well said. He is immune from prosecution for some reason. Yep. And has been long before everything related to COVID, but for torture of animals, for all kinds of other experiments, for funding the laboratory that created the virus that emerged as a lab leak, which was a conspiracy theory until it wasn't. Good times. Good times. But in case you needed anything else to be frustrated about today, let's switch gears a little bit for the last part of the stream to our other dumpster fire of a story happening on the internet that I'm equally frustrated about for a totally different reason. I saw all of the stuff about Dr. Fauci blowing up largely because of Twitter, so it stands to reason we are still talking about Twitter for this last part of the stream. I don't know about you guys. I hate Twitter. I have always hated it. I have zero tolerance for this platform that I call the place where dreams go to die. Genuinely, I have never seen more degenerate, illicit content on the internet than on Twitter. I have never seen people treat each other with more disgusting behavior than on Twitter. I've never seen more abject propaganda from the Ministry of Truth than on Twitter. And there is a new, extremely controversial decision that has been made as of yesterday morning of Twitter, now X as a platform, that's causing a whole lot of conversation on the internet. And it's this: Elon Musk's X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is officially allowing pornography on the platform, which, let's be honest, has always been on the platform. It's been a huge issue for a very, very long time, but they are officially allowing it on the platform now after a new update to their policies and terms of service. And you might be asking yourself a few questions right now. You might be asking yourself, well, isn't that freedom of speech? Sure, and I think that's worthy of us talking about. Isn't that weird for a social media website rather than a subscription adult website? Yeah, that's really, really weird. Isn't that a really degenerate, horrible decision from somebody who largely has been championed by conservatives and by people who would be wildly against pornography in the last several years? Yeah, it's a weird decision. So I want to unpack what this official update to the platform's terms of services and update to policies actually looks like, because I think it's important. And you can sort out for yourself exactly how you feel about it, but I will just be totally transparent with you. I am really upset that such an influential platform on the internet is embracing this type of content as freedom of expression and what they argue to be artistic expression, which I'll show you here in just a minute. Because the truth is, there is perhaps no other societal fight of degeneracy more important than the fight against pornography. I am incredibly passionate about this. Nothing in modern history during the sexual revolution has twisted what true intimacy and love is supposed to look like more than the pornography industry, and nothing has exploited, abused, and taken advantage of women and children more than the pornography industry. But we keep calling it this empowering, wonderful thing that is so enlightening, so freeing, so liberating for people, that's actually just continuing to shackle our society to lies. The new X adult content policy says this. Oop, I skipped something. Hang on. Here we go. The new X adult content policy says you may share consensually produced and distributed adult nudity or sexual behavior, provided that it's properly labeled and not prominently displayed. I have a lot of questions immediately about this, particularly surrounding the use of this word, consensually, whatever that's supposed to mean. It is completely impossible to determine whether content, once it's posted online, not just created, but posted online and distributed to people, was created consensually. When you're watching a pornographic video, there is no human way remotely possible to prove whether both of those people were there under consensual terms. But also B, is it consensual when porn just pops up on your Twitter feed all the freaking time under subjects related to the news and trending stories for the people who are then forced to watch it? Because I will tell you what, I don't have a lot of data and evidence and statistics to back this up, but at least anecdotally, I will tell you, I have had the biggest, actually the only unwarranted porn problem on social media on Twitter. I have not once in my career as a content creator, in which I spend 9, 10, sometimes more hours a day on social media, you should see my screen time, not once come across unwanted, non-consensual, from the viewer's perspective, pornographic material on any other social media platform. I see it on Twitter at least once a week. At least. And I hear exactly the same from all of my friends who are content creators, from all of you guys who consume content and you happen to be on Twitter. I'll look up a story like Colorado, or look up a word like Colorado, and just porn immediately is the first result every single time. I'll be scrolling through the trending section on a subject that I might want to talk about on the stream that day, and porn is just in the comment section of all of these tweets, and it's just there for literally anyone to see. And of course, we know there are minors on this platform. They recommend that you should be 17 years old or older to download Twitter. But of course, there are kids on this platform. There's no age verification. There's no warning of graphic content. It's just there immediately as you're scrolling. And I see it all the freaking time. So it's not consensual when you're forcing people to watch it, or it just happens to pop up with no warning that you can't move away from in your feed. But there's also no way to verify whether that content was produced consensually. But they don't really seem to care about that in the update to their official policies. Twitter said this: "We believe that users should be able to create, distribute, and consume material related to sexual themes as long as it is consensually produced and distributed. Sexual expression, whether visual or written, can be a legitimate form of artistic expression. We believe in the autonomy of adults," interesting, "to engage with and create content that reflects their own beliefs, desires, and experiences, including those related to sexuality." Well, that's an interesting point. Adults. Is it adults? Is it adults that are being exposed to this stuff? Is it adults that are only watching pornographic material? No. And we talk about this all the time on the stream and everywhere else, even though it's really ridiculously hard to prove, because most people don't honestly self-report on this stuff. Fight the New Drug, an incredibly powerful nonprofit that's trying to expose just how dangerous the pornography industry is, has found that based on the available data we have, very limited, the likely age of a child's first exposure to pornography is around their tween years. The majority of kids are exposed to porn by age 13, with some, it's looking more and more likely that it's many these days, by the way, exposed as young as 7, according to a 2020 survey. No matter how young, these incidents are not isolated cases, and it's not like early porn exposure only happens to a small slice of people. In the United States, it happens to almost everybody before they leave their teenage years, before they become an adult. A nationally representative estimate of U.S. youth aged 14 to 18 exposed to pornography found that before you become an adult, in your teenager, almost 85% of males and over 57% of females were exposed to pornography between 14 and 18. And not only are kids consuming this content, but kids are featured in this content far, far more often than you realize. Joshua Broom, one of my dear friends who I absolutely insist that you guys go follow on social media and you listen to his podcast, was formerly a adult film star actor and now has totally transformed his life and is dedicating his life to helping people escape porn addiction and obsession with the industry. He is a pastor and does all kinds of amazing motivational speaking. Joshua Broom, totally amazing resource on this. Every time we have him on the stream, he tells stories about working in the industry, about how girls will show up to set on their 18th birthday after having been recruited in their childhood years. And sometimes they'll lie. They won't actually ask for their identification. So they might actually be a child, and they'll sign over all of their consent forms and everything literally that day. And that's if they groom you to want to join on your 18th birthday. Child pornography, illicit images and videos, is often present even on social media, including, you guessed it, Twitter, X, which is why I will never support the new name change, because it just feels like it has oops, I'm knocking things over. It just feels like it has a sexual connotation, to be honest with you. Like, it feels icky. It gives me the ick to call it X. And a lot of you guys have made that observation over the last several days. As less than a year ago, this platform, which we will continue calling Twitter, failed to block child pornography on their platform. Not consensual adult artistic expression content, but child pornography. This was reported June 5th, so a year ago tomorrow exactly, from Catholic News Agency, which does a great job reporting a lot of these underreported stories, that last year, Twitter apparently failed to block images of child sexual abuse, with researchers detecting several dozen known images of illegal pornographic material on the platform from last March to last May, less than a year ago. Though Twitter appeared to have corrected the problem, it imposed new fees for the use of the application to monitor the social media platform's ability to block child pornography. The Wall Street Journal put together a huge report that was based on research conducted at Stanford, which conducted a study of child protection issues across multiple social media platforms. It analyzed a set of about 100,000 tweets from March 12th to May 20th of 2023. The researchers found more than 40 images on Twitter that had not been censored. They had not been taken down. The accounts had not been punished. Of course, you will be punished and taken down and censored if you said that you didn't want to get a vaccine, or that masks didn't work, or that 6 feet of social distancing had no basis in science. But you can just put up illegal, violent child sexual abuse images on Twitter. That's totally fine. The researchers found more than 40 images on Twitter flagged as CSAM, or more commonly known as child sexual abuse material, in databases that companies used to screen the content. The chief technologist at this research group at Stanford said that it was a surprise to get any hits on a very small Twitter data set. Keep in mind, Twitter has several 100 million people active on the platform. They only analyzed about 100,000 tweets, and they found dozens, plural, of images that had not been censored, taken down, filtered in any way related to violent child sexual exploitation. The platform has previously touted its efforts to combat child sexual exploitation. It self-reported that it suspended about 400,000 accounts last January for creating or engaging with material involving child sexual assault material. Well, fast forward just a couple of months to almost 1 year exactly later, and not only are we taking it a little bit less seriously, we are actually encouraging this type of content on the platform, as we call it artistic expression, and an opportunity for adults to consensually engage with freedom. That's sexual expression, totally a legitimate form of art. By the way, even though we can't prove what is consensual or non-consensual, the vast, vast majority of the time, research that experts in the field have done has shown that when pornography is produced that is non-consensual, 90% of the time, the victim is a woman. So I've actually gotten a lot of backlash for this and being upset about why Twitter would encourage this type of content to be fostered on their platform. Because people say that I'm not truly a free speech advocate if I don't allow for this type of freedom of speech to exist in the digital space, the same way that I fight for other freedom of speech to exist in the digital space, the free exchange of ideas. And, sure, call me no longer a free speech advocate, I guess, if you want, which is pathetic and ridiculous. But I do have a substantial problem with pornography being glorified as some sort of liberating artistic expression and free speech in our society that claims to want to protect largely women and children, but men as well, by the way. Pornography is a disgusting perversion of what true freedom actually looks like in love. It creates the same pathways of addiction in your brain as rampant illicit drug use. And scientists have studied this for years, proving that you do actually develop a biological addiction to pornography usage the exact same way you can for opioids or alcoholism. It changes the biology of your body and your physiology to alter how your body chemistry works that renders you incapable of, if you pick up what I'm saying, having a successful sexual intimacy experience in real life with the three-dimensional people without pornography being involved. It regularly encourages the trafficking and non-consensual sexual abuse of children, of women, of people who never asked to be a part of this, but you can't know that watching through a screen. It sells you a hollow, shallow lie of hookup culture instead of what love is actually supposed to look like. It tries to tell you that sex means nothing when in fact your body was quite literally designed for the biological aspect of intimacy with someone for a long period of time, because your body, your brain, releases certain hormones only when you have sex with someone that creates an intimacy experience unlike anything else. And we're ripping that away from people under the guise of progress. And I honestly am just heartbroken that so many people who claim to be chasing goodness and beauty and truth are hiding behind this thin veneer of artistic expression, of art in general, on free speech advocacy to bring more lies, disguising them as truth to more and more and more people. Pornography is everywhere. It's everywhere. It's on our favorite TV shows now. It's all over the internet. It's in books. It's in kids' libraries. Why do we also need it on social media? Is my $1 million question. So does this impact how you guys view Twitter, chat? Would you delete the platform over something like this? Would you stop using it? I know a lot of people who yesterday did decide to delete their accounts and say, I'm no longer ever using this platform. I rarely go on it anyway, really just to post the link to the stream. But I'm super curious to know what you guys think. Andre says there's a line that you can't cross. You must be responsible for what you say and what you do. Interesting. Alex, I don't care if this is considered free speech. It's detrimental to society and it has no business in it. Nitty Witty has an interesting point. Sexual expression, ? Sex is for a husband and a wife trying to have a baby, not for entertainment or the viewing pleasure of the public. Interesting. Well said. Cinnabelle, prostitutes are now artists, it seems. Michaels, this is the result of the sexual revolution of the 1960s. Ryan, I hope this never comes to Instagram. King Baldwin, the leper, elite username. Can I just say that? God bless you, sir. Deleted it already. Moes, I've never used Twitter, but I never plan on using it. Neeb says it honestly doesn't bother me. I could care less. Elena deleted it about a year ago, and I don't miss it. Mikey, porn is destroying marriage and society. Facts. And Michelle said, I did delete my Twitter account months ago because of pornography. Told you guys, it's an issue everywhere. John Best, yes, I would absolutely delete my account over this. Amy, I avoid anything that doesn't align with my values, and I most certainly don't agree with anything that harms the mind of the user. Interesting. Very well said. That was extremely articulate. American Patriot, I've never been on it. I'm not on Facebook anymore either. Amanda, so well said. And I think this ties us home to bring everything to a good conclusion here. It is all about desensitization. I think that's really the root cause and a hallmark trait of so many aspects of our broken postmodern society. It is rooted in desensitization of you. It's desensitizing you to illicit content. It's desensitizing you to lies becoming truth. It's desensitizing you to propaganda and to the manipulation of your rights because of very powerful people. And this constant theme that we're seeing everywhere ties into the science now just getting off scot-free with everything he's done for the last several years. And even pornography becoming a more normal part of social media and everything in between. We've allowed ourselves to become, as we talked about yesterday, so tolerant that we stand for nothing. We've been desensitized to every crazy story under the sun that nothing surprises us anymore. And when nothing surprises us and we let our guard down a bit more, horrible, evil, manipulative people can get their little hands in there and change society forever as we know it. So I pray, I really do pray every day that we are not desensitized to evil, whatever that looks like, be it the manipulation of power by evil individuals, be it rewriting history through the arm of propaganda in the mainstream media, be it the twisting of what relationships and love is supposed to look like. Our desensitization to evil, when good people sit down and do nothing because we aren't surprised anymore, has allowed a whole lot of insanity in this world. And it's up to us to prevent that insanity from continuing to take root moving forward. As we are wrapping up the stream today, I want to thank our amazing other sponsor of today's episode, our friends over at Hallow, the world's largest Christian prayer app. God knows the world can always use a whole lot more prayer, especially living in the upside down right now. Hallow is home to more than 10,000 prayers, meditations, mental health resources, podcast episodes, and more, and has totally transformed my prayer life for the better. They are the single most amazing prayer-related content app I have ever encountered, and I know it's changed the lives of so many of you guys as well. If you are looking to incorporate prayer into more of your daily routine, I highly recommend going to hallow.com, hallow.com/Isabel, where you can get a 3-month free trial to all of their amazing content. And there's some very exciting things being cooked up behind the scenes. Re-Hallow moving forward. Happy freaking National Corgi Day to everyone. And you should all celebrate by going to watch videos of corgis all over the internet this afternoon. I love you guys so very much. We'll try to keep it a little more positive and fun tomorrow, where we will be back for the stream at 3 p.m.-ish Eastern time. Don't forget to smash that follow or subscribe button on your way out. Sayonara.